we're going to move on to our next speaker. And AJ Richards, are you in the house?
I'm here.
Hey,
Absolutely.
awesome. Awesome. We're waiting to see what type of thing you have on your head. Oh, we don't get to see it today, huh?
Well, let me just
Uh,
appease
let's,
the audience.
okay, okay. Yeah, everybody's got to check this out. The tinfoil hat guy. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Uh,
So
I,
you don't have to
I,
wear it the whole time. It's just
there, there's
you're
always an evolution to who we are, and I've evolved out of this. So
okay, okay.
now I just
Uh,
carry it around as a souvenir.
Yep, cool. Well, we're
Yeah.
grateful that you're here to speak to us. I'm really excited about what you're doing, helping direct marketers bridge that gap. It's like, man, that's a painful point. Like we can produce beef. I think we're really good at what we do, but man, we do not have that marketing code cracked, and it sure seems like you're able to speak to that with authority and you're gaining some traction with your businesses. And you've also mentioned that it is God led, that it's was given to you. And so I'm we're we're grateful that you're here to share this story. Do you have
Thank
slides
you.
you want to present, or is this
Yeah.
more
Let,
monologue?
let me do a screen share here just to keep me on track.
Yep.
And
Okay. Sounds good. And we'll give you like a 5 minute warning when you're coming up against the time. So
yeah, perfect. You guys can see that all right?
yeah, just go ahead
Yeah.
and put it into presentation mode, AJ, if you're able to, and then it'll come up on full screen if
Oh, let's see. Maybe I need to try a different file here.
I think there should be an option that just says
Got a PDF that might work better. Let me see if
yeah, or
PDF.
within PowerPoint you can go. There we are. That'll work. That
Okay,
works.
that's good. All right.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Well, first of all, Jared, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I think we first met at probably the Utah Soil Health
Yeah.
Conference, probably. And so we've stayed
Yep.
in contact since then and
Yep.
appreciate what you're doing and your organization. I appreciate the message about the bringing awareness to the suicide rate amongst producers. I'm a combat veteran, so it was sad to learn that ag beat out vets. I mean, it's sad for any organization. I had a battle buddy who killed himself in 2012, and that during that time sent me on the journey of discovering why. The guy who did it was somebody that we all looked up to, and it was a shock to learn that that was the person. Sometimes the strongest among us are the ones who are fighting most of the battles, and we didn't know that. And so to learn that the same pressures and intensity is on the ag space is it's sombering, especially when human beings, we need three things, right? We need food, shelter, and safety. Those are the three primary needs for human beings. And so how do we find ourselves in a position where um, the most important role in our society is struggling so bad that that's happening? So some of my conversation today is going to start with kind of where we came from, where I came from personally, why we're doing what we're doing. A lot of you guys are going to know some of these statistics and backgrounds, but so just to jump right in here, I in 1930s there were about 6 million farms and ranches, and then the policies that started coming out to create bigger corporations, bigger food producers, started creeping into our ag system, and by the 60s or by the 80s we were down to 1.8 million. I have a little quote here that I learned the other day from Dr. John Eichmann. I apologize. I'll share it with y'all later if you want to know who it was. He did a really good presentation, but he was a professor that actually supported the growth of large scale farms and ranches in his early career, and then was kind of one of the first to start identifying the problems that was going to be caused from that down the road, and became an advocate for keeping our ag producers small, keeping it in the small family farms and operations. And so he did a phenomenal presentation. But this quote here just really shocked me, that there was that much intention, an actual strategy that was paid for and contemplated on how to get farmers off of the farm. So the CED, Center for Economic Development, the movement of people from agriculture has not been fast enough to take full advantage of the opportunities that improved farm technologies and increasing capital create. The CED proposed an adaptive approach to utilize positive government action to facilitate and promote movement of labor and capital where they will be most productive, which interprets or to be interpreted as the goal was to move 1/3 of farmers off of farms in 5 years. That was an intentional program and effort by people within our federal government influenced by big corporations. Um, I don't inherently believe that they intended for the consequences we're seeing today, but I think those certain liberties were taken because of that momentum, and now we see what we see in terms of the losses of our small farms and ranches. As a military veteran, one of the things that I pick up here on the uh, let's see, where is it? Adaptive approach to utilize positive government action. We called that the joke we had was the beating will continue until morale improves. That's how I interpreted that from being in the military. So basically, we're going to just keep driving, making issues for you until you have to leave, and we reach our goal of 1/3 of small family farmers off the operation. Now, my experience in Iraq opened my eyes to food scarcity, but I'll be honest with you, this was 20 years ago. This is me playing soccer with some kids when we took care packages to this home and we fed them. And I was aware of the condition the family was in when we got there, but it didn't really stick out for me until COVID. When COVID hit, um, I started remembering this family, which was so strange, and the look of the dad watching us feed his family, and my brain replaced him with me as if I was watching other people feed my family, and so really became hyper aware of the fragility of our food supply chain and the need to find a new path forward to strengthen and improve our small family farms and their operations. Um, so since COVID, during COVID, I had this concept that I'll share with you guys at the end of my presentation that we've built to hopefully help make a difference, but I'll get to that in just a second. So the vision is to aim to build a parallel food economy that favors small farms over large corporate entities. Now, with that being said, we have 320 million people in America to feed. There's no illusion that this is going to be a multi-decade process to get back to where we were. We have no illusions that we're going to, snap our fingers and all of a sudden everything's going to be fixed. We rely on the system that we have, but I don't see any reason why we can't start making slow progress back to more stable, small family operations. And in fact, I think our nation's food security and food sovereignty rely on that transition. So when we look at the problems that we're facing, government policy being number one, because there's a lot of influence around that. And again, most people on this call, I might be preaching to the choir that there's a lot of influence and effect. So we continue that process. Earl Butz comes into the picture in 1970, and that's the get big or get out conversation that goes along with the quote from the CED. Now we see 85% of America's meat supply chains controlled by 4 companies. And then we have other policies that if you go do the research on your own, I'm not going to dive into them, but the 30 by 30 and Agenda 21 that is being labeled as ways to help the environmental impact, but they have consequences that we will see if we're not extremely careful. And again, advantages that can be taken of in these policies. Then we have loss of small processors. So in my journey since COVID 2020, I started asking a lot of questions, and I found myself, I mean, folks, I'm just a regular person. My family are 5 generations. Let me scroll back up. This is a picture of me and my uncles. You can tell who the city slicker is. So I'm the city slicker cousin of 5 generations of ranching. I got to do the cattle drives and the brandings, but I didn't have the luxury of being pulled out of school for such. So, and I always wanted to be a rancher and get into ag. But my uncle told me something. My uncle Stacy right here, he said, if you want to be a millionaire rancher, start with 10 million, you'll lose it all and you'll be down to 1 million. And so that seed in my head said, okay, go and build big businesses so you can afford to be in ranching. And I did that for the majority of my adult life until I just kept getting my teeth kicked in And really, God said, no, you just go get into ag. It's time to jump in. And the thing that bothered me as a child, being teased by my cousins as the city slicker cousin, actually turned out to be a blessing in my later years. The blessing was that I have an understanding of both urban and rural. I lived in Phoenix for 12 years. And so I realized the disconnect was the ability to communicate between the two populations, rural and urban. And so it ended up being a blessing for me in the long run to not be so close to agriculture that I couldn't see the other side or the other conversation. Um, we also face things like water curtailments. That's a big issue for most of the producers in the West. We saw those things with what's going on in Idaho, and it's a constant problem in Utah, where I'm from. I now live in Cody, Wyoming, where I ended up, uh, like I said, asking too many questions. So I ended up in Cody, and before I knew it, I was running a USDA slaughterhouse, which was not on my radar, but turned out to be one of the most important experiences to develop this program from the farm, because now I understood selling beef for my family's ranch direct to consumer. And during that time, I knew what it was like to drop the cattle off at one side and pick up finished packaged beef on the other side, but I had no idea what was happening in between, and also what was happening in the USDA level or the processing level nationwide. And in fact, what shut our family's operation down when we were selling direct was, you know, June of 2020, calling to get our next round of processing, and they said, "Yeah, we can get you in 18 months." And all of a sudden, it was, "Oh man, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this?" And so we drove all over the state of Utah, fitting ourselves into whatever processing facility that we could, and that brought in a whole nother host of problems and challenges. Packaging was different. The label of the cut was different. It just brought a lot more challenges that we just couldn't quite pencil out. If you're selling direct, you all realize and know that the margins are so small as it is. When you add hundreds of miles extra in your travel to get to that, you start sucking up all those margins right away. So, um, and then the other side is the consumer disconnect. So like I was saying a minute ago, the ability for us to communicate to the consumer so that we are speaking their language, or they understand what we're saying, so they want to come to you as the producer and source their product. And the consumer does need to be retrained to see food as an investment in long-term health. Because when we look at, if you're selling direct, one of the common questions is, why is it so expensive buying right from the rancher? A lot of consumers don't recognize that they're comparing apples and oranges, not apples and apples. Or in some cases, some of these large food companies, they actually use food as a loss leader because they have margins on other products that are so large they can make up the difference there. And so trying to compete dollar for dollar doesn't make sense, but to educate the consumer of the different values of buying direct, and there's a lot of them, not just the quality of the food or that it's local or anything like that, but even food sovereignty. If you know your farmers and rancher, you're always going to have food. A lot of people in the cities, when COVID hit and store shelves were empty or they had limits on what they could buy, that was very stressful for a lot of the consumers. But for those consumers who had a personal relationship with their producer, they didn't carry the same worry or the same concern. So now we talk about shifting mindset, and Jared, I appreciated what you were saying earlier, because one thing I learned getting into ag was part of my past career, I was in fitness. I owned a CrossFit gym, and then I built a sports entertainment company. And that company, we broadcast live to 250,000 people. And, we'd have 600 to 900 people in the audience watching. Um, so, so what I learned about that fitness space was the comparisons that we always draw with our colleagues, right? And so I get into ag and I realize those same concerns or that same scarcity mindset existed also in ag. And I was surprised, because my only exposure all growing up were my very confident, strong, proud uncles, and I didn't see that side of them. And then when I got into it, I started seeing that. And so usually I kind of have a joke, and uh, sorry, I think it was Melissa was your name that just spoke. I apologize. Ag Women Connect, she talked about not pitting one another against each other. And I had this joke in the fitness space that matches here. If you get three producers in a room, the only thing two will agree on is how the third one isn't doing it right. And we can kind of maybe laugh about that, but the longer consequence of that, like was being said, is when you say my beef is the best, I'm saying my neighbor's isn't as good. And what I want people to understand is that comes from an old mindset. That's a scarcity mindset. If you've never heard of the term epigenetics, epigenetics has to do with the environment that we come from or that we're raised in. And epigenetics can be handed down from generation to generation. And so when I would be in all of our family meetings, because we would do this, we'd get together as a family at grandma's house, and everybody would talk about what's going on. And it was the lack of water, the lack of AUMs that were being taken away, or changes in their ranching practices that they didn't have any say on. So there's all of this scarcity mindset. That's all built around scarcity. But if we take a step back and look at the picture as a whole, we have 320 million Americans, people in the United States to feed. And there's because of COVID, there's this great awakening about knowing where our food comes from and shaking the hand that feeds us. So the mindset is shifting for the consumer, and now's the time for the mindset to start shifting for the producer, and one of abundance versus scarcity. And when you come from an mindset of abundance, if I don't have a product that my customer's looking for, I have no problem referring them to my neighbor because I believe in abundance. And I believe if I'm contributing to others, they're also going to turn around and contribute to me one way or another. And maybe it's just karma. Maybe it's just, you know, karma being God saying, hey, listen, you have faith. You continue with faith. So you're not operating under a scarcity mindset. You're going to be blessed. And so that's where we want to make that shift and start recognizing the industry size. You know, it's a 213, the meat industry is a $213 billion industry. And it's consolidated, which means opportunity. There's a huge opportunity with the mindset that's shifting from consumers to find the producers. And if we work together, if we collaborate with one another, that collaboration can start making a massive impact. We can never outspend the system that exists. We can never match that dollar for dollar, but we can through collaboration, partnerships, and relationships. Just like Jared's offering on this, he says, you know, you're not going to take anything from me. If you want to share what you guys are up to, we believe in abundance. So share what you're up to. Let's rally with one another and support and make this happen. And so that's the collaboration mindset that we're looking to work towards. So let's talk about a little bit about what customers want. And so over the last 4 years, I've been messaging the people to try to bring in awareness towards agriculture. And let me just say this right off the bat. There's some fundamental beliefs that I can't be moved on, but there are other beliefs that I have that I'm willing to evolve with. So every time I have a new conversation with a new producer in a different area of ag, it informs me deeper. And because I'm not committed to one idea, there could be some influence on what I previously thought to be true, maybe not so much true or finite, and can be I can evolve, right? And so I think that's important that we all stay kind of in that mindset of I'm willing to hear feedback and change this ground that I'm standing on because I may learn something new in a new conversation that can help me out. So when we look at what the customers are looking for, to successfully sell direct, it's important to understand what they're looking for. And so the first thing is connection and experience. Consumers want to know the story behind their food. That's the shift that's happening. Many people aren't fine just going to the big grocery store and just grabbing something off the shelf. There's a lot of people that want to know the story, where it came from. They want to be able to build that relationship with you and ask certain questions that matter to them. You're going to get asked if your beef has mRNA. And then you have the opportunity to then educate that consumer what the reality is around that, right? And everybody on here knows that mRNA has not been approved for the use in cattle. And so you can have that conversation with them and let them know. Now, is it something that's being discussed? Yes, I've heard it discussed myself from different groups, but it isn't in your beef and it isn't in there as of right now. But they want to know that. They want to become connected to it. They want to ask you certain things about how you finish your product. Some people are looking for the regenerative product only. Some people will never shift from corn and grain finished beef because that's what they love. Great. Plenty of consumers for every producer who's producing the way they are currently. But developing that message and your relationship with your customer is really important. The other side of that is transparency and quality. Modern consumers or the current consumers are demanding transparency. In other words, they want to know where it came from. The mandatory country of origin labeling is a shock to the average consumer when you explain to them that when they buy beef labeled USA, it's most likely, or depending on where you're buying it from, is probably not from the USA. It's probably imported. Now, am I saying that the beef that comes from another country is worse? That's the scarcity mindset that would say yes. The reality is it's not, for me, this is just AJ's belief. It's not so much the quality as it is the ability to access it because we're losing our small farms and ranches because of the large scale imports. They can buy it cheaper in one country, come here and sell it cheaper than what we can right from the producer, and they still have a small margin. And so it works for them. But so when I talk about imported beef, I'm not vilifying the livestock. I'm talking about the policy and the system that exists and its impact on us as a whole. And so they want to know those things. They want to have that transparency. Where did this come from? Who raised it? They want to know you and how you raised it and what your family's practices are. That's a shift in the mindset of the consumer that came from COVID. Um, they value quality over quantity and are often willing to pay a premium for products they trust. Now, we are in a very challenging economic time for both producers and consumers, right? People's dollars don't go as far. Groceries are more expensive than they've ever been. And that's where the education side can come in because you can start educating depending on how your product's finished on the nutrient density of the product if that's something that you have. And I've seen reports of comparisons through Bionutrient Health Institute that will corroborate some of those practices being different and the nutrient density that you can receive from that. And so they want that transparency. They want to be able to ask those questions. Uh, Sustainability and ethics. Ethical practices, including animal welfare and environmental stewardship, are key to selling points for many consumers. They want to know that, the big message right now is that cows are destroying the planet. But those that have a few more brain cells between their ears than those that just listen to the mainstream, they want to ask you those questions. Is it true? Like what's happening? And then you can communicate to that and speak to that and educate them on different things around the ethical practices and environmental stewardship and so forth. They also want showcasing your commitment to sustainability. They want to know from you. They're going to ask you how do those practices work so you can have sustainability? How are you insulating yourself from other parts of the supply chain breaking down that I can still rely on you and I can still receive the food if I can't get it from my grocery store? So they're going to ask you those kinds of questions. Um, they want to know if it's local and fresh. Consumers prefer local food that is fresh. Fresh meaning, I don't mean not frozen. I mean, hasn't been in a supply chain and traveled 3,000 miles before it landed at their doorstep or further, depending on the product they're getting. So they want to have have that information available to them. Um, Highlighting the freshness and locality of your product can be a significant advantage. So when you talk about your operation, you talk about how things are working, when you speak to those things, you're going to start reaching a larger customer base because that's what they're listening for. And so the more you can speak to that, the more customers that are going to come looking for you so they can count on you and be a regular customer of yours. My cousin asked me the other day, he said, man, prices are so good right now. How do I justify holding this livestock for 9 more months when I can go and get probably what I'm going to make in profit 9 months later? That's a important question. And my reply to that is, well, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Start slowly and start building your direct business, because at the end of the day, when you're selling cattle on the hoof, usually that's not your end customer. And so the idea that that customer name may not be there next year. Cattle prices are good right now at the auction, but where are they going to be next year? Whereas if you sell direct now, you're actually maintaining a customer. You build a solid relationship in perpetuity. So if the auction prices aren't where they were next year, but you started building a direct business and you're collecting those retail margins, that's your customer. You have more control of your bottom line now because you have that direct relationship. And the more that you develop those direct relationships, the more referrals you're going to receive from those people because you've taken care of them really well. So those
About
are
five
things.
minutes there, AJ. Five
Great.
minutes.
Perfect. Thank you. So the solution, food sovereignty, powering farmers to have control over their food supply, hyperlocal food systems, building local food systems that reduce dependency on big corporations, resurgence of homesteading. This is one of the fastest movements in the nation. And I frankly see it like the victory gardens of World War II, when they said, listen, we can't feed our troops and you. Everybody needs to start growing a garden and have a few backyard chickens. I see the homesteading movement of this era being a shift back towards that time. And then community support, creating a community that supports and defends their local food supply. So one of the biggest initiatives that we have with our particular platform is the more consumers that are in collaboration, the more we can reach people when bad policies are being pushed through that are going to affect our small family farms and ranches. And it does make a difference, folks. If you saw what was happening in Oregon with the small dairies, and then they backed off because of consumer pressure, and then you saw what happened in Idaho with the water curtailment, which is still going on, but it caused the government there to back off and start reconsidering because they got so much, the producers got so much support from the nation, like, hey, this is not okay with us. You're messing with our food supply chain, which is our producers. So the more people we can bring together, the more we can have help defend our right to food sovereignty and buying that from where we choose. There was one thing I want to just share real quick is that there's a difference between food sovereignty and food security. Food security is just the ability to fill your belly with something if you're hungry. That's food security. Food sovereignty is our right as individuals to choose the food we want to eat. And so we need to defend food sovereignty more than food security because the language matters, the words matter. So steps to getting started, market research, understand your local market and consumer needs. My social media, I've got 140,000 followers, I think. That's education for me. I get to ask them, get feedback from them, what they are looking for from our producers. The average person on my following is 55 to 65-year-old women. They're the ones who still remember what it was like to buy local, to prepare wholesome, quality, nutrient dense food for their family. And they get that. That makes sense to me why that audience is my biggest audience. So do research on who your audience is. Build your brand, develop a strong brand that resonates with customers. Your brand is your message. What you and your family are up to is your brand, and they're going to follow you and be a part of what you're doing because of that. Setting up sales channels, utilize online platforms in local markets. Ensure all regulatory and legal requirements are met, and then engage with your customers and build those relationships. I can't stress that part enough. You may want to be disappearing out on the ranch, but if you understand the value of developing those relationships, I encourage you to find your voice and let them hear from you. Um, there couldn't be a better time uh, in recent history for you to be vocal and share with people what you're up to and how you do it. So to close here, the call to action from us specifically, we built a platform called From the Farm. And as Jared said, in 2020, God spoke to me and said, this has to be done. It's basically the Airbnb of local food. And I said, no way. I don't know anything about that. I just went through a bankruptcy. I'm slinging concrete part-time. I'm working Walmart. I'm doing whatever I could to put food on my table. And here's this concept that I have no business being a part of because I don't know tech. And I couldn't sleep for 3 weeks. I kept seeing the face of that man in Iraq. And so finally I said, okay, God, where do I got to go? And that was April of 2020. We launched in March from thefarm.org. It's a great experiment. Can we build a platform not designed around profit, but designed around supporting our farmers and ranchers, and where we are looking to earn the profit, because we do have people supporting this financially, is through affiliate partnerships, things that complement food. Can we build a system that does not take, because we're still the middleman. We're trying to remove as many middlemen as possible, but we're still the middleman. So how do we do this in a way that we don't earn a profit off of the producer's food? The producer gets all that profit. We're looking for other ways to do that, and through affiliate partnerships is one of those ways. Um, so if you guys are interested, you can send me a message. I'll just scroll up here real quick to my contact screen. You can give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, whatever you'd like. Go to fromthefarm.org. There's a button that says become a producer. We verify every single seller on our platform that they are a family private owned operation. That's the only verification that we do. So when you go on there and see blue check marks, I've had a chance to visit with that family personally to get to know them. So the customer knows when they come to the platform, they at least know those who they're going to connect with are truly family owned farms and ranches and not a corporation posing as such. And so uh, I'll wrap it up there and
That
take
is
any
awesome.
questions if anybody has, but I appreciate
Yeah.
the opportunity.
We'll probably do this, AJ. Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, very concise and appreciate you sharing that information. If there
Thank
are
you.
any questions, if you want to go ahead and type it in the chat, and then maybe AJ can respond to those in the chat. We're going to roll on to our next speaker, but appreciate that. Also, yeah, if anybody needs contact information, but probably the best thing is just go to the page that Margot just posted. Um, and that is access to be able to list your farm or ranch on there. Is that right, AJ?
Yes, yeah. So you'd list your operation, and we would help you get that set up. And then our job is to do all of the marketing. That was the biggest thing that I identified that I could have used help on when I was selling direct. Is, man, all these services are out there to help me, but what I needed the help with the most was marketing. So that's why we describe it like Airbnb. They did a really good job bringing millions of people to that platform, and if we can do the same, producers can focus on producing.
That is awesome.